Well, a pleasant good morning to you all, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. It's a Friday morning. You are looking live out the window to the campus of Central Washington University. Local temperature, 63 degrees Fahrenheit, variable winds, overcast skies, a little bit of rain coming our way, even in eastern Washington, but definitely in the Cascades and western Washington. It's a live stream from the office of room 134 of Discovery Hall. And I see plenty of 5x5s, including from Garrett, the Dutch Nodile from the Netherlands. Good morning, Garrett. Good afternoon, Garrett, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us live on a Friday morning. Here's to you. The local time is 8:47, possibly 8:48 local time, Pacific time, in the morning. And today's date is Friday, August 23rd, 2024. What's the topic? Come on, man, Idaho. It's been an Idaho month, more or less. And we will continue today with a special guest, Basil Tikoff, who many of you fondly remember from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, many live appearances. It's been a while since we've had Basil on here live. And I need to try a couple things testing-wise with him in a few minutes. So I might take my walk a few minutes early than I normally do. But let's say hi to a few of you and make sure that we're okay. I'm seeing a few more 5x5s. Thank you, Eric and Dan and Christopher, John. Thank you. Bob, bunch of males saying 5x5. Thank you. Where are you viewing from today? Can I say hi to a number of you? I've got something in my throat here. Hang on. Excuse me. Where are you viewing from today? Port Wing, Wisconsin. That's Andy. Kevin is sitting in his tent in the rain near Snoqualmie Pass. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for the dedication. Sharon from Malaga. Arjan from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Heard of it? Will and Joe Slick live. Leamington Spa, England. Birch Bay, Washington. Tucson, Arizona. Overland Park, Kansas. Many familiar places here. Southwestern Washington. Basil's in Madison, Wisconsin. From his office, he will be showing up momentarily. Eugene, Oregon. Brussels, Belgium. Salem, Oregon. Houston, Texas. Claude is in Montreal. Good memories of your city this early July. Liz and I spent a full week there. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm thanking you for opening your doors to the city. What? Stop. Media, Pennsylvania. Lake Ozark. Don't know what state that is. Thank you, Kirk, from Philomath. Riverton, Illinois. Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Looking for some new towns. Looking for new cities. If you've never bothered to type in where you're viewing from, maybe this morning's the morning. Maybe this morning's the morning, and I'll see a spot. Hey, Caesar, from the Bronze Chapter crew in Seattle. Hey, Caesar. It was really fun to hang out with you a couple weekends ago. Ontario, Canada. Yosemite, California. Hi, Sean. Are you hanging out in the park today, or do you work there maybe? Elma, Washington. Exotic Battleground, Washington. West Virginia. Wild and wonderful West Virginia, says Lewis. Pueblo, Colorado. Arlington, Texas. Sean is with us. Sean Wilsey just barely finished Iceland update so I could make this. Oh my God, Sean, you have been on fire. Were there 2 Iceland live streams yesterday and you just finished one again this morning? You do not have to. Sean, go home and take a nap. You do not need to be here. You can watch the replay of this thing. Thank you for being here. Cambridge, UK, Maltby, Washington, Angus, Ontario, Canada, Virginia City, Montana. Everybody saying hello to Sean. Hollister, California, Kingwood, Texas, Sparks, Nevada. Okay, a quick update on my week in case you're curious, and then and then I need to email Basil. So it's been a full week. So Monday morning, I interviewed or had a live stream chat with Sean Wilsey. That was Monday morning. Then Monday afternoon and Tuesday, most of the day, I was filming the last Nick on the Rocks episode for the season. So we have finished all 8 of the brand new Nick on the Rocks episodes. So it was nice to get that in just as the rain was coming in on Tuesday afternoon. So I'm done with Brady and Backcountry Gary for quite some time. Feels good to have all those in the barn. It's up to Brady now to do the editing. I don't have to do anything there. So that felt good. Wednesday was a recorded Zoom interview with Gene Humphreys. Maybe you saw that one. Gene took us another step towards thinking about tomography and flat slab subduction. And then yesterday, Jordan Carey and I, you remember him from a couple of videos in the channel Scablands, Jordan Carey and I drove up to White Pass and met Hannah Shamloo and Kelly Wall and the Goat Rocks team. We hiked on the Pacific Crest Trail yesterday, got some beautiful footage, interviewed mainly Hannah Shamloo and Kelly Wall. Didn't really spend much time interviewing the students, but got to meet them and got to get a sense of what the project was about. It's going to be a while before I edit that one because I just got a text that our daughter-in-law has gone into labor. So I'm going to head up to Bellingham as soon as I'm done with you all here. And our first grandchild will be appearing sometime in the next 24 hours, hopefully. Okay, so that's the update. And if I'm a little scattered, maybe that's why, but whatever. I can lock in here. Basil is so fun to be with. And you are all so fun to be with here as well. Okay, so that's my update there. Gosh. Yeah, I want to do this. I want to give you a shot out the window. I want to take my walk. And before I take my walk, I want to interview, I want to email Basil and get him connected to Zoom. And as you know by now, when you are looking out the window, all of you guys live, you'll be hearing me talking to Basil. You'll just hear me, I think, talking to Basil, but I want to test out what I tried with Gene, see if it works kind of off camera with Basil, and then we'll get started at the top of the hour. Okay? That's the plan. We're going to start the program at the top of the hour. That's about 5 minutes from now. Thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed today's live stream. Out the window you go. Okay? Talking to myself, boy. That's a Zoom window, is it not? I am inviting the esteemed Basil Tikoff. And there that email goes. Take a quick walk, and then I'll see you in a few minutes. Hot mic. Hot mic. Good morning to you, Basil. How are you today? I'm doing just fine, thank you. Let me get myself... Oh, on my way. So you must have a second screen going so you can watch what's going on. Okay, good. And you're without earbuds, but you're not worried about reverb or anything like that. The audio's off on that? Okay, great. You're looking good, man. You're looking good. You're sounding good. Come on. I think the live audience can hear me, but they cannot hear you at the moment. I want to try something, Basil. Well, first of all, sorry. I'm going to come to you real early, like 5 minutes of me, and then we come right to you and we just go where you want to go. Do you have a few slides that you're hoping to share? Yeah. I love it. Okay. So you spent time with them. Let's definitely look at them and use them as our guide. So you're comfortable sharing your screen. I'm sure that's fine. And you have what, less than a dozen of those slides? Okay. Very good. Okay. The thing I'd like to try before we start for real is I got to talk to myself now. I'm in Zoom. Oh, is this going to work? If I do this, what do you see right now, Basil? Oh, you do? Okay. And, okay, viewers, I guess you're going to, okay, that's not going to work. Got it. Okay, I think it might work. Can you still hear me? Okay, great. I'm just going to go for it. I think I can share my document camera and, okay, let me think for just a sec. You have your iPhone going. You will be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I don't want to be too ballsy this morning. So I think why don't you try that? And I think you might be delayed by just a couple of seconds with the video. So I'll be out of sync, in other words, audio and video. But let's try that. I'm more comfortable using my stations here, and then I'll come to you in about 5 minutes or so. Okay, I think that's going to work. And you'll be able, even if you can't see what I'm doing, you'll be able to hear what I'm doing, and you know the drill by now about what I'm up to anyway. So that'll work. Okay. Thank you. I think I'm going to get started. You okay? Sounds good. Thank you. Basil's running to get some water. We'll wait just a second until he comes back. I chickened out. I was going to do a special thing live, but I think I'm going to chicken out. I might get gutsy towards the end. John says, Basil, the mind blower Tikoff. Yeah, I agree. He'll be up to his usual tricks, I'm sure. Oh, we have almost 400 on a Friday morning. That's wonderful. All right, Basil's back in the office. I think I'm going to get started. He can hear me at least and possibly even see what I'm up to. Okay, wonderful. A pleasant good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special live stream with a very favorite guest that many of you remember from 2 years ago and 3 years ago, but it's been a while. Basil Tikoff, University of Wisconsin, longtime geology professor, and the guy that put the Penrose Conference together a year ago, in August of 2023. And so we will be touching on many aspects of Idaho geology because this guy has spent more than 25 years thinking hard about Idaho geology, but I am prepared to go all sorts of directions because that's always what happens when we're with Basil Tikoff. So I'm looking forward to that, and yes, we'll have all sorts of time for your questions to ask Basil directly. I want to do one thing before I bring Basil on and lob out 2 questions for Basil that I'm hoping that we can address, and I think that's probably his plan anyway, but just in case, let me lob those out. This is what I'd like to do. I forgot my other papers at home, but I redrafted it just a few minutes ago. So you know that I'm heading towards the Cascade Volcanic Arc, and that starts 46 million years ago, and we will be up here in green for most of this upcoming winter. But I think you know that we as a community have been thinking hard about earlier than 46 million years ago to the Chalice magmas. I'm semi-comfortable with the Chalice magmas in Washington, and we have Jeff Tepper who will continue to help us sharpen our focus on those Chalice magmas, an extensional regime in eastern Washington, and then breaking a Farallon plate to create a break-off belt of magmas in the Cascades. I'm all comfortable. But Basil, my first question, you don't have to take these in order. Why are we getting these Chalice Age magmas to the east of Washington? And are they getting older than 53 million years ago? And if they're getting older than 53 million years ago, we're not really in the extensional time anymore. So I'm getting confused about why we have Chalice Age magmas, quote unquote, as far back east as the Dakotas. That cannot all be tied to Silesia. I can't imagine. I know Silesia is profound, but is it that profound? So that's one major thing I'm hoping we'll talk about. The other main thing I want to talk about is, I still have a major question mark here. And I'm wondering if our guest today can give us an option or 2 to really tell a very specific tectonic story for why these magmas of the main phase of the Idaho Batholith are happening between 85 million years ago and 53 million years ago. I'm confident that our guest knows the most about the western Idaho shear zone and the early Idaho magmas, and we will definitely get into that, I'm sure, on the heels of Wrangellia and Friends colliding. But this is the area that I thought might have been a volcanic arc up until a few weeks ago, and now I'm super doubtful, and we'll see what Basil says, but I'm super doubtful at this point, with my knowledge currently, that we have a true volcanic arc with a subducting plate between 85 and 53 million years ago. We go to the man, Basil Tikoff. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, Nick.
I appreciate your time. Is school about to start there at Madison?
It is, but I have to say, Nick, on probably behalf of myself, but everybody else, congratulations. Holy cow, be careful driving to Bellingham.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you. I'll be at 10 and 2. Is that what they say? And I'll be extra careful getting up there and making sure everything goes well. I'm sure it's up to me. Okay, great. Let's dive in. Thank you for your good wishes. Which of those, how do you want to operate? Do you have the same 3 chapters? Let's start with that. Do you have the same 3 rough chapters with Idaho geology that I've been working with, or am I missing even a chapter?
No, I think you've got it. I think basically there's a couple different phases. And then I'm at 55, the world goes to pot. And it's happening all in Washington, Idaho, Oregon.
Okay.
And so that's a crazy time. And so to sift out why we think that's what's going on. So because I'm a geologist, I would probably do it in order, right? Just basically make a story, just basically go through with time what I think. And I have to tell you, you made me commit to making cross sections through this basically through McCall, from the coast to McCall through time, just to so make it simpler. Um,
You made them just for us?
yeah, but you'll see it. Maybe you don't want them.
Well, good. I think we should just go. I don't know. And if you share some of these images, and if I get particularly jazzed, hopefully you're nimble enough to get out of the share, and we can just go back to our two heads. But yeah, you're nimble. You know Zoom. Oh, look at this. Yeah, full screen, perfect. Yes, and your cursor I can see as well. Oh, I love it, Basil. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, so I think you got it. It actually matters, but somewhere starting at 125 to about 100, I think this is one of these weird cases. I think everybody would agree there's an arc. There's
Okay.
just a magmatic arc. The only thing that I think, what I'm pretty sure is that we do not know what is the oceanic plate that's subducting,
Okay.
right? We just don't know. We know there's an oceanic plate. It's almost certainly not the Farallon.
Okay.
So
Wow.
there's
All
something.
right. Well, that's something to chew on right off the bat, but I don't want to break your pace. Do we? So why? Those magmas older than 100, none of those are in the Idaho Batholith today, correct?
So what are you calling the Idaho Batholith? So, and by Rich's definition of Idaho Batholith proper, that's correct. These things are all plastered on to the western edge. They're either in the western Idaho shear zone or just to the west of the western Idaho shear zone.
Okay.
And but they're good arc magmas. They're
Okay.
hornblende bearing, they're magnetite bearing, they have mafic enclaves, they're everything that you want from an arc magma.
Can you give me two specific field sites that I can go visit those magmas?
Sure. So the type locality is Hazard Creek. So it's the Hazard Creek complex of Kathy Menduca and others
Okay.
would be one place.
Where is that?
That's between Riggins and McCall in Idaho.
Okay. Oh, okay. We
So
are right there. Okay.
another one you could do is like No Business or Council Mountain.
Yes.
Um, I can point you to them, but they're basically on the west side of West Mountain in
Okay.
Idaho. So they're basically west of the 706 line. But if you also wanted to visit them, you could just visit the Western Idaho Shear Zone because those are the granites that got deformed in them in the Western Idaho Shear Zone, but they were arc granites.
Huh. So why when we talk generally about the Idaho batholith do we start younger than 100?
We so Rich Gashning did an incredible job during his
Yes.
PhD to figure that out, and it's actually mostly post 85, and it's because the Idaho batholith are those two mica granites. It's how you define it.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
reason is the earlier stuff looks like Precambrian gneiss. Some of it was mapped in the 70s and 80s as Precambrian gneisses, but they're not. They're Cretaceous gneisses, right? But something bad had to happen to them.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep going with a few more questions on your top sketch, which is the oldest sketch. I notice you have some strike slip component. Can you comment on that and help our viewers understand what the circle with the dot and the circle with the X means?
Sure. So the circle, so if you look at this, this is going to be unlike everything else. This is sinistral.
Yes.
The intermontane is almost certainly moving in a sinistral fashion down the coast of North America. And most of the strike slip is probably in or close to the magmatic arc. So the dot on the cross section is the point of the arrow coming at you.
Yeah.
And the X is like, I believe it's the fletching of an
Oh,
arrow. What do I know about arrows?
look
The
at
back
you.
of the arrow
Yeah.
pointing away from you.
Okay. Good. And so that's left lateral, and so ocean plate is heading is colliding and going south.
That's right.
Transpressional. And last question about the top from me: why are you confident that's plate X and not the Farallon?
Because plate X is, if I had drawn it a little further out,
Yeah.
it would have Baja BC on it.
It would have Baja BC on
The
it.
only and the best model I think to make this work is Spencer Fuston's working
Yeah.
with Johnny Wu. The
Okay.
plate X contains Baja BC.
I see.
So Baja BC will be running into North America in the next picture down, but it's attached to whatever that plate is.
Okay. I promise one more. I promise only one more. So the whole reason I got into this Idaho thing at the beginning of August was I was asking, can I visualize a volcanic arc with a subducting plate in Idaho before the Cascades got started? And I guess the answer is yes if I'm willing to go back more than 100 million years. So far, is that what you're saying?
Yes. If you
Yeah.
want normal, do you want normal? I don't know if you want normal. If you want normal arc, you
Yeah.
have to go back to pre 100.
Pre 100.
After that, Nick, you just don't get that wish. I don't there the Idaho batholith is almost certainly not a subduction related magmatic arc. Is it a volcanic was there a volcanic edifice on it? Maybe.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not subduction related. There's not a whiff of mantle in that stuff.
Okay, well, that's definitely a sneak peek to what's coming. So great. If you want to keep going and get younger than 100, great. Or if you've got a few more things to say before 100, by all means.
The only thing I'll say is the same is true in California. So if you take these 125 to 100, it's the same thing. There's
Yeah.
basically subduction at that time. If you go to 100 to 85, and I
Okay.
wanted to make a case, it's the same thing in Idaho as California. It's stunningly similar
Huh.
in the two. Don't tell that to California geologists. They're not going to like that, but it's nonetheless true.
Okay.
But in Idaho, it's actually a better case to be made. So what we know is the Western Idaho shear zone starts at 100. In fact, there's really a great paper out by Claire Harrigan talking about this, and they've basically dated when the thing starts at 98
Okay.
in one location by McCall. And it's a really clever study. So, so that's Boise State work. So anyway, the Western Idaho shear zone starts. So that's the center of my universe.
Yes.
It is a right lateral zone.
We've switched. Yep.
So we've switched. So now the X is basically the backside is basically everything's moving north. And that's going to happen. 100 is the switch.
Yep.
Everything's left lateral before, north afterwards. What's happened is Baja BC has collided. Baja BC had, or the insular superterrane, had a subduction zone below it. This is a different plate. This may or may not be the Farallon. It may or may not be the Resurrection. I'm going to stay agnostic on that. It's a plate that's subducting, but that means if this is next to North America, there is no longer anything to subduct
Yes.
under Idaho. So
Yes.
it's not though that plate goes away. It has to subduct and go down, and it seems to me that's about a 10 million year process to get rid of that plate.
And it's one thing to draw with pencils, but it's another to, as you're doing here, reference Spencer Fuston from Houston, who says, I've got a plate down there. He's calling it the Deep Cascadia Slab.
That's my recollection. I really should double check that. But yes, that's his Deep Cascadia slab.
Okay.
And so that's the one that's under the middle of the country. It's not the one on the East Coast.
Right.
It's not the one that's attached to the Juan de Fuca plate.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the intermediate one.
Well, my memory, so I think I need to get Spencer on, and I'm hoping that I can. It sounds like he's been watching these. My memory also is that he's got a Cascadia slab and a Deep Cascadia slab, and I think he's differentiating them like you are right here. The Cascadia slab is perhaps the Farallon that he has that is still subducting, I guess, and then the Deep Cascadia thing. You've laid it out beautifully, and I will take it to Spencer and see if he's got something similar in his mind, I guess. But we're way earlier than I planned on going, but that's what you do, Basil. You keep pulling me earlier and earlier because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on before the Eocene, for sure.
Right. And it sets the stage. And I think
Yes.
that's kind of the point is you can't just there's a history to North America. It actually
Right.
starts in the Precambrian and you can't
Right.
get away from it. That history is influencing what happens. But
So, go ahead.
no, I was going to go to the next slide because you just prompted me to get a little bit more recent. Kind of get with the times is what you're saying.
I'm not. I mean, I'm going to ask one more before you get modern. We do have a bunch of magmas in Idaho, 100 to 85. Are you showing those magmas from a slab failure mechanism?
That's correct. There's slab failure. And what's interesting is they actually sneak into the main Idaho batholith. You can find real arc granites like hornblende bearing, enclave bearing, magnetite bearing in what's the Idaho batholith now, but they're all old. They're all in this 85 to 100 range. They're coming mostly around 90. So there's little isolated pockets. So one, that there's nothing special about Idaho that can't have an arc, right? If you subduct a plate under it, it's going to have an arc, right? It doesn't matter whether it's continent or ocean you're subducting underneath, you're going to get these magmatic arcs.
Huh.
Does that make sense?
Well, I'm kind of confused because maybe I'm too strict on what I'm calling a volcanic arc. I guess I'm imagining a subducting ocean slab like the Cascades, and that is the reason for the magmas. But you're showing some slab failure is different, right? It's not.
It it's more or less the same mechanisms. It's still probably water flux melting,
Oh, I
uh,
see.
right? So it's the mechanism by which you produce the magmas.
I don't want
And
to
so
get
you
hung up. I don't want to get hung up on this, Basil. But I thought the idea of slab failure was you're breaking the plate and you're getting hot mantle surging shallower than it should be and getting different chemistries. But you're not saying that.
there is likely an element of that as well. So
Huh.
that if you look at the discrimination plots, if you believe that sort of thing, you do see a distinction
Okay.
of those. So
Yeah.
something else must be happening. But this same thing happens in the Sierra Nevada. The 100 to 85 million year old plutons have the dextral starts at 100. It goes everywhere on the eastern part of the batholith. It's not that it's moving like this, it's just like boom, it's everywhere on
Right.
the eastern side. And it stops at 85. It's like it's a stunningly similar story. The only thing is in the Sierra, there are like five shear zones, right? You can talk about the Rosie Fidge, you can talk about the Jim Lake, you can talk about the Sing Lake, the Courtright, but the oldest at the Courtright starts at 100.
Well, viewers, we need to listen to this guy, of course, in general, but specifically because I'm reminding the viewers, Basil, that have deep knowledge in the Sierra Nevada of Eastern California and the Western Idaho Shear Zone. It's safe to say those are your two areas that you know far better than most. And so to make those statements that it's identical between the two areas, between or earlier than 85, you've seen it for the last 30 years, right?
Yes, that
Okay.
the shear zones are there.
That's beautiful. Okay, I'm with you so far, and I've already got 3 or 4 major lessons from you already. So I'm not doubting we'll have more major ideas coming in the next couple of sketches. I'm loving this. Thank you. Please keep going.
Right, and just keep asking. All right,
Oh
this is a
boy,
bit of a mess,
I love
but
it.
here we go. 85 to 55, that arc in Sierra, the subduction related magmatism is off. What you have is an Idaho batholith. And there's the little bits of that old stuff that you can still see in it,
Right.
but it's basically an orogenic plateau. It looks like a little mini version of the Himalayan plateau, right?
Okay.
So it's high. And the reason is something is crashing into it. Because every time you get something crashing in, you get a foreland fold and thrust belt. So you get the severe fold and thrust belt. You get an orogenic plateau that has the two mica granites in it. You have to do something. I think you thicken the lithospheric mantle underneath North America. The intermontane does not thicken. In fact, well, this is not part of your story. That's been my mystery, why that doesn't, but whatever. And the
Uh-huh.
insular still has a magmatic arc. That's where the subduction zone is. And the subduction zone, and this has to be resurrection. So now I'm with Spencer on this one. This has to be the resurrection plate at this point.
Wow, wow.
It's not Farallon, but it still has to produce an arc, but that arc's on the insular super terrain.
Okay, a few questions. Loving it. First off, I mean, I thought the headline has always been if you're a major Baja BC person, you don't like the resurrection plate. It screws up your story of having one major Kula plate going north. So this is new that you're a major Baja BC person and yet you like the resurrection plate. Are you out on an island with that among your Baja BC people?
I don't, it's, how do I want to say this? There were two reasonable hypotheses. One Peter Heusler and others did, and one Daryl did. And they're all because of this triple junction magnetism at 55. And the question is, it's in Alaska and it's in Washington. So did the one in Alaska start in Washington and move up or not? And it seems like either is permissive. And this is the work of, I think it's just Spencer and Johnny in 2021. Yeah. And they say there's got to be a resurrection plate because of this slab that's under Yukon presently. Yeah. That you can't get around that there was a separate plate there. And I think it's not as big as the original proposal for the resurrection plate. So in other words, both Peter and Daryl were right, is how I think about it.
Okay.
That there was right lateral motion, but there was this other plate. There had to be some other plate involved.
Love it. Next question. Working west to east, where can I find that volcanic arc on the insular older than 55? Where can I find those rocks?
Oh boy, you're gonna have to take a helicopter ride and go with Glenn Wordsworth, because that's the stuff that's in the coastal belt. So you have to be in from Juneau.
Yeah.
So you have to be east of Juneau, but you have to be west of the insular intermontane superterrane boundary.
Got it.
So it's the coast plutonic complex, is what I would say.
Well, I just caught myself. I'm thinking like, oh man, east-west. I'm just thinking east-west cross-section. So I'm thinking, where can I go in eastern Washington or eastern Oregon to see this? But of course, it's Baja, BC. That thing is up in BC and points further north. Okay.
But it wasn't when the magmas were intruded.
Right.
The whole system is so three-dimensional, and it's going to get worse at 55.
Okay. All right. Let's keep going. There's so much to chew on here. I mean, the last three guests, Gene Humphreys, Sean Wilsey, maybe earlier, I guess Rich Gachnik as well. They're talking about generating magmas during this main phase of the Idaho Batholith just by simply thickening the crust. That seems disappointing to me. That or even if it's believable, it's not satisfying for me as a major magma factory. But I guess I'm just out to lunch on that.
It's strange, right? There's ways you generate magmas, right? One of them is subduction, because you flux the water. You do some petrological magic in the lower crust, and then you put these things in. So that's one way you can do it. Okay. But the other way we know you can produce magmas, well, there's three other ways, but one of them is that you can just thicken the crust so much. And the strange thing is, why is there so much in Idaho at this time? It's not that you can't do it. It's just the magnitude by which you do it.
Okay, that's my last question from this sketch. Why the delay? If we're slamming insular onto intermontane and then ultimately daisy chaining it back to Idaho, why are we waiting 15 million years before we start all this thickening? Why don't we thicken right away?
It does. But the problem is, it's not like, wham, up you go. It's a process, right? Where it takes, if you start shortening a crust, it takes the estimates are about 10 to 15 million years to
All right.
thicken the crust enough
Huh.
that you start the radioactive heat to generate, to storing the radiogenic heat to start producing the magmas. There's just a 10-year delay
Hmm.
between when you start shortening and when you produce the magmas, right? Because it's not instantaneous,
Yeah.
right? The fold and thrust belt is instantaneous, which is why the uplifts in Wyoming and Montana are starting at 195.
Well,
So
why
we
wouldn't
see
you
the
have why wouldn't you have those fold and thrust going all the way back to the margin with the insular then? Or do you?
you might, but it's so melted you don't see them anymore,
I see.
right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
the right? It's
Yeah.
you can't tell. It's like the Tibetan plateau. The big thrust belts are on the margins
Hmm.
of the plateau. They're not on the plateau. But if
Hmm.
you look in the plateau, there's major shortening features there, but the shortening magnitudes are not much, which is interesting because that's exactly what you see in Nevada. You see major shortening in Utah belt, but in sort of this two mica belt, which is right on the Utah-Nevada border, there's only like tens of kilometers of shortening, but it's no different from the Himalayan situation.
Okay. Could you please stop your share momentarily?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I want to thank you, number one. Like, this is perfect. You've watched these programs this month. You've sketched something out that seems new to me. I don't know if you've been publishing on some of these ideas, but I don't remember hearing this from you a couple of years ago, some of these things. So thank you for just kind of committing, as you say, to a couple of these narratives. And I know there's at least one more panel to go. The other thing I want to just catch my breath on here, this is just so perfect. Remind me about the paleomag in the Idaho Batholith. Merle Beck went there and didn't get something satisfying, and you've been drilling in there and others. Like, and I ask that because I'm immediately now thinking about the Carmex volcanics and the fact that we need a major Baja BC structure to the east of Idaho completely, I guess. Like, so what can you comment on in a rather coherent way about paleomagnetic signatures in the Idaho Batholith, please?
So the easy answer is 85 and older, you've got a shot at doing it because they're magnetite, titanomagnetite bearing granites. The Idaho batholith are paraluminous ilmenite, which does not carry a magnetic signal, granites. You don't have a magnetic carrier.
Oh, wow. I didn't have that before.
So you get them again in the chalice because the chalice is a garbage bag. It's unbelievably weird, right? So it's got some that do, some that don't.
Right.
Some really weird alkaline stuff, which we'll talk about. But the point is, it's really hard to do it. So the little bit we have, so the other problem, and this is the dirty secret the paleomagnetists don't tell you. So this is like on the sly here. Yeah, exactly. If it's deformed, it has a terrible, it's basically unusable.
Right.
Paleomag. Right, you just can't do it. Even if it deforms above the Curie temperature, you still can't use it. So, and boy, have we tried.
I bet you have. I bet you have. Okay.
So the only little bit we did, which is going to turn out to be relevant, is on that north, right by Orfino.
Right.
There's a post, it's these 85s that are post collisional, but there's still a little bit of the magnetite stuff in. So.
Okay, last question before we go back to your next slide. So I had my question mark for visualizing a tectonic story for the main phase of the Idaho Batholith between 85 and 53. You're giving it to us in the sketch we were just looking at, I think. And it's not a volcanic arc right there. Okay.
It's not a subduction related volcanic arc.
Yeah, thank you. Back to the slides. Well, we've already done what I was hoping we would do, basically, except the eastward chalice business, which doesn't make sense. I'm guessing that's where you're going. But, I mean, this is all gravy after this point. We haven't even gotten to the live questions yet. Damn, you're good. Okay, let's go. Back to the slides.
I'm not sure. I mean, right? Just don't ask other geologists. They would probably disagree. I mean, this is my opinion, but I've been working there for a while.
It's perfect for us, and you are the expert. We're listening to you. Come on. I don't want to listen to somebody in Southern California tell me about Idaho. Give me a break.
Okay. The problem, as I've said, is this system is wickedly three-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
So while this is going on, I still think that's right. This whole thing is rotating.
It's coming back to me.
Right? It's rotating on the Lewis and Clark zone, which is going to turn out to be huge. What's going on? That Lewis and Clark line is left lateral because it's allowing Idaho to push in.
Mm-hmm.
So that has two main consequences for what we need to talk about with the magmas. One is that Idaho is going to have more magmas because there's more shortening in Idaho than anywhere else in the Cordillera because of this localized effect. The prediction is it's the highest point in the Cordillera because it's the most shortened. And Liz Cassell actually has some data that suggests that's exactly the case, that it's southwest Montana, eastern Idaho that's highest. And it's like right there. It doesn't make any sense unless you have a mechanism that would localize it there, and that's this rotation.
So you've got the mechanism, but is that a magma producer or a magma denier? Is it good?
It produces it because it thickens the crust, right? So there's two things you have to do with magma. You have to generate them somehow, and then you have to get them up. You have to intrude them somehow. It's harder to intrude in contraction when you're smashing things together. It's easier if you start pulling apart the crust. So we'll get to that, because when you start pulling apart the crust, you add another mechanism, which is decompression melting, right? If you pull apart a crust, it's like uncorking a soda bottle, right? The bubbles start coming up, right? And so you've decompressed. So that decompression also allows magmas to form.
But we're not there yet, right? At 55, we're still squeezing.
We're still squeezing.
Right. I don't know if you've got more on this slide, but we've got our transition from the Atlanta in the south up to the Bitterroot in the north in this 30 million year range. Does that make sense to you as we're rotating and compressing?
Yes. So Rich talked about this a little bit, but the Atlanta lobe used to go all the way through the Bitterroot lobe.
Yeah. Oh, right.
We know that because there's zircons of Atlanta lobe age in the Bitterroot. Those are the crysts.
Yes.
And so what that just means is you just melted more. Like you just went into melting plus in the Bitterroot, which is where basically the northern part of this Idaho stuff.
Good answer. Rebuttal. Why then is the Bitterroot not the same area as the entire Atlanta? Why did the Bitterroot decide to localize to the north, coming up through the Atlanta?
Because the shortening is more. It's a pinball thing.
Oh, wow.
The further you are from the pivot, the more you have to shorten. Which is why the highest shortening and again the paleoaltimetry data says the highest point is up in the Bitterroot area. It's in the Sapphire Block in Montana. All of that stuff is really hot and high, and that's why when 55 comes, you're going to basically put all the extension, you're going to localize the extension in the highest point, which is the old Bitterroot area. That's the north part of the Idaho Batholith.
All right. Would you mind stopping your share again, please?
Oh, no. I'm worried about this, Nick.
So this is the moment where I'm imagining you sitting in your living room watching me interview Rich Gashnig and Jeff Tepper a few weeks ago. And I'm like, the Bitterroot lobe's about the right place and about the right age for the earliest part of Jeff Tepper's rollback. And I just imagine you sitting there. I can't believe this idiot's asking this question. It's a compressional story. Why are you talking about shallow magmas coming up? I mean, and that's the point. If we're that old, if the Bitterroot is in this older time, in this compressional time, we're not doing slab break off or rollback or anything. That's impossible, right? With the wrenching down in the middle of the flipper that you're talking about right now.
So it's not that I've got a corner on truth, right? It's that I'm trying to build a coherent model in my
Right.
brain that
Yes.
matches all the available data, including the fact that you still have thrust faults going until 55, 58 million years, right? And so again, it's not that there couldn't have been an edge effect from the subduction zone, but I don't think so. It's still too far south.
Right.
Even at Bitterroot time, it's still too far south. You still have the Baja BC is outboard.
I mean, I caught myself in the middle of a couple of those programs, looking for this earliest signature of Jeff Tepper's rollback, which is an extension story, basically, all these chalice magmas. I caught myself, wait, I'm a little too old. That's a compressional time. Wait, I'm in the craton. Are we really expecting all sorts of rollback and magmas coming up in this very different craton versus the accreted terrain country? There were so many reasons that I kind of in the moment like said, this is dumb to look for these earlier parts of Tepper's story in a thick craton that's too old anyway. And now you're confirming that with the fact that we haven't flipped the switch to start extending anyway.
Right, which is not to say you couldn't have some kind of plate margin effect, right?
Yeah.
But again, I don't want to say this. There's kind of this battle of the people who just want to call on process without worrying about history. And if you just want to worry about process, like just slabs doing what they do, and North America just has to do that, and it's just like that's kind of on one end versus the geologist who's like, there's a fault there. It's been there
Right.
since the Proterozoic, and it keeps
Right.
getting reactivated in weird ways
Right.
every single time, right? And so North America and the structuring of North America has an effect on these processes. You can't just worry about a slab without saying what's overriding it and what's going on in the overriding plate, because there are distant effects in the overriding plate. They're not proximal.
Right. Okay, this is too good to stop, and I know we have at least one more sketch, probably more, but this is gold. This is your best appearance. I'm just going to call this right now. This is your best appearance of all of them. So please, I can't wait. Let's go back to looking at the next slide.
All right. So, well, I don't think I shared screen. Hold on. Now you got me all
I got you all
worried about you driving to Bellingham. Okay.
Okay.
All right. One thing just to say, the Idaho Batholith is not weird. There is a 2 mica belt, which is probably an orogenic plateau that extends from Mexico to Canada. Southern Canada, but Canada.
Okay.
And are all 2 mica paraluminous granites. The Idaho Batholith is just the biggest slug of them. And the pattern changes at the Lewis and Clark line, where they're really young, right? We don't get them until like 60 north.
So paraluminous, I learned from Rich Gashnig, essentially means we're generating melts in a craton versus the terrain country. Do you agree?
There's an association, but it's not necessary. You're just melting crust.
Okay.
All you have to do is melt crust.
And I think I learned from you the significance of a 2 mica granite is that we can't have a volcanic arc. It's got to be something else. And why is that again? Why does the 2 mica mean no subduction?
Well, it's not solely that, but it means that you have, because it's mostly remelted lithosphere
Okay.
or crust.
Yeah.
If you only have in that crust things that look like arc granite, you're just going to produce more arc granites if you melt it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not a distinctive thing. And Jeff Tepper was very good about saying there are some things that are diagnostic and some things that aren't, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's often more associations, but there's only a few things where you can tell, which is actually where we're going to go next.
Good. Good. Let's do it.
Okay, so okay, this is what I'm a little worried about. Okay, Idaho, we can go past that. We can go past this. This is what I'm worried about
We're worried about.
because I don't know that this is right.
Okay.
But if I had to, if you made me, which is I had to make myself do this,
Okay.
said what's going on at 52, I would draw something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to point out a couple things. So in orange are the chalice.
Okay.
And we're going to actually look at what those data are. They're in the mid 50s to late 40s. They are from South Dakota all the way. What's interesting about it is this Lewis and Clark line
Yeah.
was active in a left lateral zone. At 55, the world changed. And what happened, it has nothing to do with North America. It has to do with a subduction system on the west side of the Pacific, something around the Philippines and New Guinea, where there's a change in subduction of the Pacific plate, and that rearranges all the plate motions.
Okay.
Just like the 100 has to do with the subduction zone in Antarctica, right? It is a far field effect. And you just have, and the plates rearrange themselves. So this is a case where it really has to do with the subduction geometry.
Okay.
But there
Let me.
had to have been, yep,
I need to pause you. Sorry. I was flirting with the idea of the plate reorganization in the Pacific Basin about this time, in the neighborhood of 50. It keeps coming up. Mike Eddy commented on it. I think you've commented on it a couple of times. And I was, I guess, innocently going towards maybe the accretion of Silesia was so profound that that caused the change in the Pacific, the ocean plates of the Pacific Basin. Are you saying there's potentially a completely different reason for that plate reorganization?
yes, there's a completely different, of that, I'm relatively sure.
Oh, wow.
It has nothing to do with North America. It's got to do with the West. I
Okay.
also, and I know this might not be the thing for the Pacific Northwest crowd. I don't think of the Stachenia, of the Silesia accretion as profound. I see it as an
Oh,
effect of something bigger.
what the hell? I just said this was a great. You just blew it on that statement. I love Silesia so much, and you are not a fan of the profoundness of this thing. That's what you're telling me.
It's more that the world changed, and Silesia is part of a bigger picture where all of a sudden the Cordillera from Oregon north becomes part of a big right lateral system.
Wow. Wow.
And
Okay.
Stachenia goes into a hole. It
Silesia or
basically, I'm sorry, I do this all the time.
it's okay. Yeah.
Silesia basically fills in a hole.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, Nick, is there's extension everywhere, right? There's extension starting at 55 down in Idaho in
Mm-hmm.
things like the Pioneer Core Complex or the Bitterroot Core Complex.
Right.
If Silesia was going to really smash in, we would never see that.
Yeah.
It's like Silesia wasn't there. And then I
Hmm.
realized it's not that Silesia wasn't there. Silesia is part of the end of the parade of Baja BC. It's like the little guy sweeping up the elephant poop at the end, right? And so it moves in a right lateral, right? It just kind of fills in this hole. And the reason is all these terrains have moved north, and they basically, it's the Intermontane in particular that could not go further south, but it has started to move north on things like the Tintina, which is the Rocky Mountain Trench Fault,
Yeah.
and it just opens a hole. And these subducting plates don't like to bend. They never bend if they don't have to. They never go through 90-degree bends. They're just these gradual things, and if they can not bend by pushing something in there, that's what they did. So that was my making peace with Silesia
Yeah.
because it undoubtedly accretes and undoubtedly has local edge effects as it's trying to get in.
Yeah.
No question about that. But on the scale of North America, Silesia is not a big deal. It just fits in. It just goes into the hole, and it has to do that in a right lateral sense. But the whole system is the right lateral.
Okay, can you stop your share? This feels like a pretty
Wow.
big moment. I like it and I'm listening, and I think you said it, but I didn't quite catch it. What's happening in the other side of the Pacific in this time frame that is causing this stuff happening from the Dakotas all the way out to Washington?
Okay. So this is you have to go to people who work on G plates, like
Yep.
Mueller at the University of Sydney and his group.
Okay.
And what they look for are big changes in subduction zone geometries.
Okay.
Because the idea is that slab pull is the dominant force.
Yeah.
And if you clog a subduction zone, which is what happened in Antarctica, then all of a sudden there's no pulling down that way. But you can also torque plates, right? So plates can be doing this, and then you can torque them as you do that. So it's subduction zone changes. So we could put that, I could dig that one out and put that on it. I think it's a Mueller et al. 2019 paper.
Okay.
So you just changed far field subduction polarities. So what I have to say is like, okay, you go to a movie, right? About, some cosmic thing like asteroids, right? They always hit Los Angeles, Tokyo, or New York, right? So tectonically, Washington State is Tokyo for this. Like, it's not where you want to be because it's got the biggest bit of the origin over in Idaho, which is sitting right behind it. It's got this big outboard oceanic plateau, and then it's got a triple junction coming in, right? And that triple junction's been moving up the coast. It starts in probably Mexico and it's moving up the coast, but it happens to be there at 55 when the plate motion changes. So like everything kind of comes together in Washington State to make a mess of things.
I love it. Let's go back to that sketch. It's perfect. It's perfect to then zero back in and look at the details on that sketch. I'm only partly way in there. So I'm trying to catch my breath. This is so good.
But
So-
okay, I want to make a caveat. I don't
Go.
understand Silesia. I really don't get it. I think the work that Mike Eddy's group's doing is great,
Yeah.
but I don't fundamentally understand what it is or why it's there or how it's separated from the Yakutat. I just don't get any of that.
Okay.
I also don't understand. There's got to be triple junction magnetism associated with this.
Mm-hmm.
Where you put that triple junction, is it between Silesia and Yakutat? I don't know. This is my best guess.
Okay. That's fine. And that caveat, and you don't have to know everything in every place, Basil, but you've got really exciting ideas related to this. And you are confident, especially in that right half of this sketch, where the Lewis and Clark is doing an about face. It's going from left lateral to right lateral at 52.
It starts, yeah, and I just want to be clear. It's only active from the edges of the metamorphic complexes. So this is Thor Odin, this is Pioneer, this is Okanagan. And the problem is that they want to move apart. But the Bitterroot, Anaconda, they want to move apart because they're in the high topography. But you can't move something apart and move something apart without keeping moving south. But it goes through what's effectively a transfer zone, very much like a mid-ocean spreading center. So this fault, the Lewis and Clark is accommodating the fact that the extension wants to be further east in Idaho to the south, but it wants to be up in British Columbia and northernmost Washington state to the north. It's the accommodation zone that allows that to happen.
And that Lewis and Clark potentially extends all the way back to the Black Hills.
Yes. And this is why it finally clicked. But this zone was left lateral, so it was pushing together. But all of a sudden, you're not pushing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So these granites back in South Dakota and Wyoming are post-orogenic relaxation granites. They are what happens when you push things together and then you just stop. And the great thing about those granites is they have a signature. They're full of rare earth elements.
Okay.
And so are these. It makes sense.
I like it. It's fun. I'm going to go to Spencer next, and from what you know of Spencer Fuston's work, do you think he's going to be fine with this, or is this a major departure from any of the tomography that you've seen?
So what I think, not to put word in Spencer's mouth, but
right,
they have in their model a subduction zone between North America and the resurrection plate because they're trying to get rid of it through time. So I think he would prefer a subduction zone here. The difficulty is that there is distributed dextral deformation. The tentina, which is way inboard, starts going active. Baja BC is active. The coast shear zone is active, which is basically in Baja BC.
Yeah.
Right. It's right in that coast plutonic complex. All of the core complexes, if you look at the margin, the core complex elongation is not parallel to the boundary. It's oblique, which means you're not going like this. You're pulling it. I can't tell with the mirroring on the images.
You're fine. You're fine.
You're basically pulling it in a right lateral sense. It becomes a transtensional system at 55. It's still dextral, but it's transtensional.
So all those chalice dikes in central Idaho trend northeast, I think. And that's
exactly.
what you're showing here, south of the Lewis and Clark line.
Exactly. And Bob Miller and colleagues have stuff in the Cascades that also trends northeast, which requires this oblique opening. So it's transtension. And so all of a sudden, these granites, which have been being generated, just basically have all this space to move into.
Okay, I mean, I almost want to go to the live questions right now, but is there another slide or two that you feel like finishes the story that you have for us?
I just think this one, because this is the data.
Okay.
So what Alan Glazner basically just compiled stuff from NAVDAT. So he basically said who went out and collected a sample and where are they? And so from 55 to 50, this is at least a slide of where those granites are. And at 50 to 55, they're more in Idaho than everybody else, but they're really kind of spread out. But at 50 to 45, that's when it's all in Idaho. And that's, again, I think these are orogenic collapses. They're not to the south. I mean, look at 55 to 50. There's nothing going on south of the Idaho border. Right? And so there's a fundamental difference in the north versus the south. But I want to emphasize it's because to the north, there's a lot of dextral, and to the south, we don't see it. So there's this fundamental change, and that's probably because of this triple junction that's coming in. This is not to say that Jeff is not right about this rollback out here. There could have been a rollback. There could have been triple junction magnetism. I'm not saying that. The only thing I'm saying is these from the whiz to the west, whiz to the east,
to the east,
is not that.
There's
no way. These are post-orogenic relaxation, post-orogenic collapse granites. They look, smell, and taste like them.
Do you have any feelings about Gene Humphreys's Southern Oregon slab tear? And does that work or not work with this scenario?
Okay, so I am. This is. I don't want to say this. I don't think that the Farallon shallow slab is real. I think
Okay.
it's a figment of everybody's imagination.
Yeah.
There is no. So insofar as I never call on it because I never need it. And moreover, and this is an important point, those magmas that are running along the Lewis and Clark line, but always to the south of the Lewis and Clark line,
Yeah.
you don't need them. They're not the right granites. These are not arc granites. They're post-orogenic relaxation granites.
Hmm.
They make no sense as slab-related granites. And the geometry makes no sense. I mean, they're following a structure. It's the Lewis and Clark line. They're not following a slab. And that Lewis and Clark line's been active since 85.
Hmm.
So again, it's interesting that you can make two completely different stories based on whether or not you think there's a shallow slab there. But in the north of the California border, it is a really hard case to make.
Huh.
South
Any
of the
more?
border,
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably time to go to the viewers. Is now the time to stop your share?
yes.
Okay. So much there. I'm going to have a good time watching this one a few more times and thinking. So thank you. Viewers, we're coming to you. If Basil has another 15 minutes, we'll do a few questions. Uppercase, please. And I will try to go through as many as possible and get a number of you. Here we go. Kevin is in his tent in the rain up in the Cascades. He's watching the live stream and he asks, is the Idaho slab curtain Basil's slab failure plate X?
No.
Too shallow.
It's way too shallow. So the Idaho curtain does two things that no other slab on the planet do. One is it starts at the moho. It starts below the crust and goes down. So that thing didn't detach, right? So you have to call on something that didn't detach. And the second thing is it goes through a 90-degree bend. You want to know where the 90-degree bend is? It's about at Orofino, Idaho. So it's actually, I don't think it's a slab at all. I think what you're looking at is thickened North American lithosphere. I think Gene's tomography is excellent. He's a great seismologist and he's a great generator of ideas. But I disagree with him on that everything that's a mantle anomaly has to be a slab. I think that's thickened. And I think Gene's right, it has to be lithosphere too. I think it's just thickened North American lithosphere.
Wow. Because Tepper's model has that slab curtain as a big part of the story. That's the thing that broke twice and got vertical after breaking. Tell me again. Go ahead.
Right. Tepper's story doesn't hang on that curtain being a particular thing. You can still have his story, but it just can't be that feature. So the thing about the curtain is it's only on the North American side and it takes a 90-degree bend. And it starts at the moho. I find it much more compelling that that's North America. North American lithosphere than a slab.
Let's keep it going. Sean Wilsey from Southern Idaho. Do the Chalice magmas line up well with the zone of maximum thickness of crust from the severe?
Yes, generally, which is to say that there's more in the north, but the core complexes are the joker in that because the core complexes, Anaconda and Bitterroot, are extending. And so you have two effects. You've got the Chalice magmatism effect plus this core complex effect. And those core complexes are only south of the Lewis and Clark line. So, yeah, you'd have to think about that harder than I've thought about that to see if there's if there's more, if the chalice actually gets less and less to the south, because there's definitely some chalice like down in southwestern Idaho in the Hawaiis. So it's not that it's a definite, it's a matter of volume.
Thank you. Let's keep it going. I'm back a ways in the live chat. Will, is the two mica belt a signature of the overridden East Pacific rise, with the Lewis and Clark line a transverse fault on the rift zone?
So no, I don't think so. The East Pacific rise is the Farallon Pacific boundary. So the Pacific doesn't interact with North America till approximately 30 million years. And that's Tanya Atwater's work. And then and so we don't, so it's unlikely that the two mica belt, which ends at 55, 58, could have been that rise. Could it have been the Farallon resurrection plate is another interesting question, but you don't, so that when you intersect a triple junction with a subduction zone, you get near field in the forearc magmatism, but you don't see that behind the arc generally. So it doesn't go very far into the continent. So it's unlikely that that would be there.
Thank you. You can grab some water if you need it. You're working hard there. Yeah. Sven has two questions in rapid fire. In the Crazy Eocene series, Basil, didn't you have a rotation center in northern Idaho 70 to 55? And you mentioned also the ceasing of the Lewis and Clark line doing sinistral that is connected with the pushing in of the promontory 80 to 60. Could that be directly related to the Bitterroot lobe?
I think Sven is right that the Bitterroot lobe has to be that push of that going into that corner, the Orofino corner, and that there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on. There's younger structures like the Mount Idaho structure that are pushing even further in. So there's increased contraction. So my guess is that's right. The early East, that was 3 years ago. I could change my mind.
Okay.
No, but no, I think but yes, I think there's rotation. I don't know where the pole of rotation for that is.
Thank you. John Nash. Basil, how long can spreading ridge related upper mantle upwelling remain active after continental override?
Oh, that's a great question.
How long can a spreading ridge related upper mantle upwelling remain active after a continent goes over it? Why do you think he's asking that question?
Because as you put, so this is a better question for Spencer because he's thought about this with the resurrection Farallon boundary. And so the idea is as you put these slabs into the mantle, you don't actually see anything between the two slab segments, right? Because that exactly what you're saying, the spreading center seems to keep eating into those plates as it goes down a little bit. I simply don't have the expertise to say how long that happens for, but at some point they just are slabs and that's no longer active. So is it 10 million years? I don't know, something in that magnitude, maybe.
I'll try to remember to bring that up with Spencer. Jonathan, is there any room left for westward subduction? Bob Hildebrand, is westward subduction anywhere in? It wasn't in your sketches, I don't think.
You can have westward subduction up to 100 million years. Okay. If you think the Sierra Nevada and the Idaho batholiths are against North America and are attached to North America, which I do, the only way to have westward subduction is to have a subduction zone that goes both ways. So you've got one underneath North America, and you've got one underneath the insular terrain. And so you can have westward subduction to bring it in and push those two together. I have no data to say which of that is, but that would require a subduction polarity shift in insular as you go from this to afterwards that. Um, if I'm wrong about that those things are attached to North America, so Bob Hildebrand wants to bring the Sierra Nevada in underneath a westward dipping subduction zone. I don't see evidence for that. And the reason is the history of North America, Nevada is so similar to the California stuff that it's really hard to put a suture through there anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I see these really good Precambrian transforms that keep influencing everything, and they run from Utah border out to California. So if there is a mysterious suture, you can still do it. I don't see evidence for that. I think much more problematic is what Steve Johnson is talking about with the CarMax group in Canada. I think you do have to do something really screwball up there. I think he's right about that. And I just don't know what to do up there.
I keep coming back to that. It's like, it's so elegant and simple, and talk about a fly in the ointment. Okay. How about three more, Basil? Kathy asks, is the bend in the Hawaiian chain the same shift in the plates that happened to the west that Basil mentioned?
The shift in the Hawaiian hotspot. Okay, so I'm at 80% on this one. I should have looked this up. I think it's approximately 45, and that is another major plate motion configuration. And I think that's when another one of these plates, the Kula plate, joins to North America, changing subduction geometries. But that is a subduction geometry change that's probably driven by the North American subduction systems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So no, in that sense, it's a little younger than everything else we've been talking about.
Two more and we're done. Papagino asks, could an invading ocean plate could an invading ocean plate wedge itself into a craton and pry it apart, thickening the crust or heating it up to produce surface magma? Question mark.
Yeah, if you had a really, really thick pile of basalt, something like these big stacks in the Western Pacific, like Ontong Java, you could potentially push into a continent and cause orogenic collision. And, what's fascinating to me is that the Orofino bend is a Precambrian bend, and no matter that the insular terrain hits it or Tane hits it, it still remains a rift transform in the craton afterwards. It's just really strong. I'm not even sure why it's as strong as it is. But cratons are really hard to bust up. The idea is that there's a thick mantle section to them, something called a tectosphere that goes down further. The Wyoming craton is one of the few that doesn't seem to have it, but it's quite thick. And so it seems unlikely that you're going to disturb a craton.
Thank you. I think I'll take the last question. Am I off target when I make statements like there's still a disconnect between the tomographers and the paleomagnetic people and the field mappers and the regional thinkers and the local geology people? Where are we with that? You would think in today's day where it's so easy to get on and do a Zoom chat between two people and sharing research and everything, have we made progress in getting more communication between these areas of specialization with these major questions in the American West?
That's a super question. And I think the answers we're getting closer, but we're not there. There's just fundamental differences between what you can do. When I looked at the models for the Pacific Northwest of 55, the thing that was most striking is I could not find any two models that were actually the same. Like anyone, like the petrologist, the structural geologist, the right, nobody had the same model. I mean, it's like so, and I think it's just a confusing area of the world, right? We're going to figure this one out last in some sense because it's just so complicated.
Right.
It's all what you're going to build on with the Cascades arc, but it's a really complicated history there. I also think there's the issue that everybody trusts their own data a little bit more, and that's good, right? Why would you spend so many years trying to like do what you do, so that you just don't want to give it up? And I think that the big difference there is to trust your data, but be loose about the interpretation, right? Because you can do a really good job. Gene Humphreys, I think, does a great job in tomography, right? I don't have to agree with his interpretations, though. And so the question is like, there's some going to be necessarily push and pull there, as you figure that out.
Beautifully said, and I mean it. That was an excellent appearance. I don't even have to look at the live chat or wait for the comments down below this video. I know that people are going to love this one. And so thank you so much for your time today, and we will be thinking about you as we continue. And I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in Idaho, but I have to just keep digesting what you've shared with us today. So thank you so much for this, Basil.
It's my pleasure, Nick. It's always a fun to be here with you and everybody else, and drive safely.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day. We'll see you next time, whenever that is. Goodbye, Basil Tikoff. Goodbye. He did it again. He did it again. If you are relatively new to the channel and that was your first encounter with Basil Tikoff, I'm referring to appearances that he made a number of times, 2 winters ago and 3 winters ago. And I thought I had a trajectory, a plan, and then it was completely scrambled because of all this exciting, original thinking from Basil. And that happened with the crazy Eocene, where before I knew it, I was out of the Eocene and talking about the Cretaceous, way more than I thought. Because to understand the crazy Eocene, you need to first understand the Cretaceous. And then, of course, 2 winters ago when we were doing Baja, BC, Basil and a few others have been steadily investigating Baja, BC for most of their career. Just a few people have kind of kept the torch going. And so, yes, he was a major part of that series as well. So I wasn't planning on having Basil join us this month, but I think I've said it to him privately. I think maybe I want to say it publicly. I forget if I've already said this to you. I'm sorry. When I started the live streaming things in my backyard, it never occurred to me that highly respected, I think I have said this to you, it never occurred to me that highly respected geologists with full careers would be watching the programs. And yet Basil Tikoff, who I did not know, in the fall of 2020, when I was in my backyard with Bijou the cat trying to learn the most basic things about exotic terrains, Basil Tikoff and Daryl Cowan in particular are the two names that come to mind, where they were in the live chat with everybody else, and they were enthusiastically supporting and endorsing what I was doing just by being there. And yeah, they were trapped at home too, but to be kind of publicly there and showing support and interest for my very unusual approach, it meant a lot. And here we are a few years later, and now Basil is just watching just for fun. And so the plan was not to have him join us, but as I mentioned the last few live streams, I kept feeling myself drifting back towards Baja, BC. And we didn't necessarily hit Baja, BC on the head today, but to add that fifth dimension of this orogeny and then this orogenic collapse, I think the timing was right to have Basil with us, and I hope that you feel the same. A toast to you. Here's to you and your health. Thank you for joining us for today's live stream. Here's to you. Here's to Basil Tikoff, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. Go Badgers. Thank you, Basil. I hope everything's going well with you. I don't expect to be live streaming anytime soon. I've been hitting it kind of hard, so I'm just going to purposely back off. I've had a blast, but I am hoping to have Spencer Fuston from Houston on the next, I guess it'll be a live stream, I'm not sure, but sometime next week. But there's stuff going on this weekend that is very different than geology. So thanks, everybody. I love you, and thank you for joining us today. Best wishes to you all. And goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. We'll give you a shot out the window before we say goodbye. Goodbye. End stream.